Well, hi everybody. My name is Nevin Mast. It's time to start, so sounds like we had a lot of great conversation going on in the room. But I am a pastor at Mount Pleasant Mennonite Church in Chesapeake, Virginia, about 3.5 hours from here. We are Mount Pleasant and myself are fairly new to Rosedale. We've been in the network for about 2 years now. First question is, how many co-vocational pastors do we have maybe in the room? Quite a number of you, or have been? Yeah, okay, so we're all on familiar ground here. Maybe some of you have been quarter-time or half-time, three-quarter time, full-time at some point, maybe, I don't know. But I've actually been all of those except for full-time. Right now I'm three-quarter time at Mount Pleasant. And I own and operate a construction company and have some investment property, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit. I'm going to share my story a bit of my experience and some of the things that I've learned. So some of you being co-vocational, how many folks do we have that are in like farming? Maybe farmers. Okay, a few farmers. Yeah. Wow. Construction. What else? Retail maybe, or some of you are maybe employees.
I do love your chart.
Okay, all right, yeah. So just to note that there are so many variables when it comes to making this work and doing it in a healthy way. So hopefully you'll learn something today. I'm going to sort of, as I said, share my story, but the variables in my life are, I own and operate a construction company. And then I'm, right now the sole minister at Mount Pleasant. So many different facets, so many variables to make this to really work well in a healthy way. But I'll also say to begin with, I realize I really could be a full-time minister. It's been offered to me, suggested. I've actually been told that I already am a full-time minister. People look at me that way. But I would say that I've come to a place in my life that I feel like this is the best fit for me, to be co-vocational, three-quarter time. I'm at a place now that it really works well, actually, and how my life functions with family, with church life, and with business, and being a follower of Christ Jesus. So many times, however, it is a balancing act, a true balancing act for these roles to work well with all the responsibilities that God has blessed us with. And I know that we all want to be faithful, right? We want to be faithful in ministry. We want to be faithful, of course, to our family, our spouses, our children, to our jobs as well, our clients, whatever that might be. We want to be faithful. We want to be that loving spouse, that present father, that or grandparent, and a caring pastor who's available to our congregation. And we want to have that time, too, to faithfully prepare those messages that we impart over the pulpit, which is so very important. And then there's business or whatever it is that you're engaged in, and there's all those responsibilities, the deadlines, the problems, the issues that come out of nowhere, right, and throw everything out of whack, and the clients, whoever it is you're serving, you're wanting to take care of and do your part for them. And then life happens, right? Bad weather happens. There's a family crisis. There's a funeral. All kinds of stuff. It throws everything out of whack, and it makes life more difficult sometimes. I know a few weeks ago I had a week that, there was a funeral, and there were issues with one of my projects I was doing, building a garage. It just seemed, when it rains, it pours, and it was pouring that week. And I so looked forward to, I had a sermon on Sunday, and then, that evening, the funeral, I was so looking forward to having all that taken care of, then I could finally breathe easy a little bit. But we have those times where it's not very easy. But all of this balancing then can make us feel like maybe one area of our lives is not getting the attention that we feel it needs to be getting. And that can really be difficult for us to realize and to deal with. And so, like, if you're like me, you question yourself. You have these questions that are in your mind. Like, for example, am I meeting my wife, my wife's needs, children's needs, relationally? Am I spending the time with them? Am I being present for them? Or maybe wondering, does the congregation really feel like I'm earning my wage, if you want to put it that way? Earning my keep? Am I meriting what they're giving me? And so that sometimes I find is something I wrestle with. Sometimes I'm not quite sure. Sometimes have I done maybe too much of the other side of the other hat? Have I worn the construction hat too much this week? How are people looking at me when they see me doing work, driving around in my truck? What do they feel about that? So there's questions that we might have, and I'd like to say it's maybe can be expressed as maybe an inner restless inner murmur that we feel sometimes, like we're missing the mark, and it can sometimes make us very uneasy. And then many times the response to that is to stretch ourselves more, to compensate, to meet the mark, to hit the mark. We might stay up later to get that done, or we might, not go to a ball game for our kids or something, and we're stretching ourselves, and that's not good either. And we could face the possibility of, feeling burned out. Depression. I've wrestled with depression. At certain areas, times in my life, really struggled with that. And I was warned of that from the get-go, from my uncle, who was a minister who really struggled with depression. He said, you really need to guard yourself. You need to be aware of that, because he had to spend some time, away in an institution, and really struggled with that. So I had that warning. What are some, here's a question for us, and I think we're probably small enough that we can just maybe entertain this question here together. What area of co-vocational ministry tends to be a challenge and make you feel as though life is a bit unbalanced? Now, I choose the word, it makes you feel unbalanced. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. Because sometimes we might feel a certain way, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the actual truth. We might feel like we're missing the mark. So what comes to mind? What tends to be a challenge, make you feel as that life is a bit unbalanced? When I talk about all of these different facets, what's a challenge? Anybody?
Something you can't see me, I apologize. I'm this guy. There we are. What I've noticed is, and I'm an assistant pastor, so Mike and I, our cadence is every other week. So, but when I have to transition from work to, let's say, sermon prep or just devotion time, it's hard to make that transition up here. I know I have to do it, because I'm a director of sales for a wholesale distribution company that's half the country. And I direct all of that for one division. So my work laptop is in this bag right here. And I'm still hitting that this week when I need to in the evenings. But it's like I'm on call 24/7 with my job. Yet I have to set aside this time because I have this, for me, the most important call in my life, what I'm doing here, compared to what puts food on the table and etc. And so it's the transition time from work to prep, or work to devotion, work to prayer time. And then, in the middle of that, I have to push back to the other direction too. And I notice it's getting harder and harder to go from one world to the other. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
it's a struggle in here. I mean, this is the primary, how I see this is the most important thing that I've done, occupation, let's say it that way, or call in my life, what I'm doing now here. But I have so much responsibility in that other world too. And so I would love to hear how you guys...
So that transition, yeah, is difficult.
How do you handle that?
Okay. Anyone else? What's a challenge? Makes you feel unbalanced sometimes, or for those of you maybe looking back at on your life, what was a challenge for you? Maybe you came to resolve that, but what was something you, in your experience, have wrestled with?
My experience is that it's for my personality. It's easy to be wherever I am. That's the most important thing, and what I've tended to do is then all of a sudden, say we're at a funeral, we're with people, and I said, well, the most important thing is for me to keep on hanging out here, and then all of a sudden either I'm forgetting about some other responsibility that needs to be, or I've let somebody down because I get late to something else, and that really creates just tension, because I've tried to do, it seemed like we were told to be in the moment with the people, but then also that has to be balanced with the fact that there's some other needs.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
One of the things that's helped me in the balancing, rather than feeling unbalanced, is to recognize that God has put me in place in business for all kinds of relationships, all kinds of conversations, all kinds of mentoring with employees, that it is every bit as important ministry as the actual sermon that I'm going to work on. Often in the marketplaces where God has placed us for a reason, for ministry. And so starting to see it as one whole rather than these two different worlds.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's basically one of my concluding points of blessing, because I believe co-vocational ministry can be a tremendous blessing. But let me take time now to share my story, which in doing that I'll push out a few other things I'd like for us to consider that I feel the Lord wants us to consider here this morning. So after a 3-year term of service in Mozambique with MCC in 2006, my wife and we came and we decided to settle down in Chesapeake, Virginia, my hometown. My wife is from Percy, Pennsylvania. We met at Eastern Mennonite University. So since then, really since 2006, I've been involved in some ministerial role at my home church there in Chesapeake, just serving the Lord in Mozambique. I just realized I had a call to this, call upon my life, and I just stepped into that. I first started as a quarter-time youth minister at my church, and that was about 5 years that I worked at that. And at the same time of becoming a youth ministry, I started a construction company with my father, a residential construction company, and we built, at that time, we started in building homes. We were doing, additions, major renovations. I'll admit I had my dream. I wanted to build this big construction company, and I had dreams and aspirations. And however, I will pause. I'll just mention this. I do remember distinctly, in the midst of all this, and I'm saying, I realize I have these dreams, but Lord, if you desire me to lay this down, I'm willing to do that. This is your company. It's not mine. So looking back, and this has been good for me to reflect, but I do remember that. And all that we have is His anyways. And I think we're to use it all for His glory. So that was that. That was being a quarter-time youth minister. Then in 2012, there was a pastoral need at church where I actually transitioned into a half-time assistant pastor role, while continuing to run a construction company. And this point in time, looking back, was very challenging. Very demanding and challenging to balance everything, business, family, and being a minister. another added degree of weight was that our church was beginning to experience, conflict, and that was not healthy. That added more stress, put stress on me as the assistant pastor. A lot of the conflict kind of revolved around the lead pastor. So during this time, I really felt I operated out of balance, and so I had all these pressures of trying to, spin these plates, keep the business plate spinning, and then there's all my ministry obligations, and I kind of had a lot of unhealthy expectations placed on me, and I did a poor job managing. My time. Failed to set up needed boundaries. That was one of my biggest mistakes, was not doing a good job setting up boundaries. I let myself be pulled in all kinds of directions. I would say even my marriage at that time, was challenging. My wife was stressed out as well. We had young children, and they were kind of getting the short end of the stick. I knew something had to change. Something had to give, or something was going to break, and that was going to probably be myself. And so after much prayer, I realized that I had to guard myself and my family, and I needed to step back, and I announced this to the church, and as that actually was kind of the spark that lit the fuse, and everybody kind of said, "What's going on here?" And then that's when we had a lot of real problems and conflict within the church. Was from just my need to step away, which it all led to. This is all part of my story, but it led to the lead pastor resigning, and a lot of the people in the church then left with him. I just felt like the Lord wanted me to remain, to be present, to trust Him. We're talking about radical trust. That was a time where I just had that radical trust that it was going to be okay, and that the Lord was going to give me what I needed. He did. He was faithful. Even now, it brings up emotions because it's a very painful time. But yeah, these tears are ones of joy because all the many times He was so faithful. And so I praise Him for that. So this was a time where, changes had to be made. I was stepping into now a 3/4 time ministry position, I found myself in this position and still having this business to operate. However, I did realize, I had to scale that back, and I began to scale that back. I actually went to the extent of had two businesses. I had an LLC and a corporation, and I just realized I had to simplify things for my own benefit. Dial down the dreams and aspirations I had, and I simplified things. I put everything into one business, and that remains till today. And that does, that was a good move. I believe that was from the Lord. And I guess part of that was coming to the place where I had to, remember that prayer time I had with the Lord, that, Lord, this is your business. And so I had to accept that reality that I needed to dial back on the business. But right now, I currently do, I'm 3/4 time pastor, but I still do remodeling and some smaller projects. I find myself in people's homes a lot, rubbing shoulders with people. A lot of repeat customers. My name's passed around. I actually keep a list. I have people waiting on me for months now to get to them. So that's really quite a blessing. Where people, they trust me to come into the home. They're like, "Here's the keys, Pastor Nevin. Do what you got to do." So. But one thing I want to talk about is, especially during this very challenging time where I stepped into the lead pastor role, this is something that really helped me to, I believe, even now to function in a healthy way as a co-vocational pastor. And I think this is what I'm going to talk to you about is beneficial for all pastors, but maybe especially for those who are really trying to balance everything. I would say during this time I really dug deep and had to figure out what it was that I needed to function well as a pastor and not repeat the historical pains that I had just experienced and was a part of all that when there was so much conflict within the church. And the Lord just seemed to lay into my lap some of Patrick Lencioni's work. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but was a very profound reality for me where during this challenging time, I learned, a lot about what it was to be a leader, what a leader needed to be, and I better understood what people need from their leaders and how important it is for leadership to be humble and even willingly making themselves vulnerable. And that's the key word right there, vulnerability. Vulnerable to hear what needs to be heard. And it's a difference. It's very different when, for example, this is what I'd like to bring to the table is that I'll tell you really what that looks like. But let me just say, I just really believe that it's very important for all pastoral leaders to be vulnerable. Pastoral calling, many times, it can be lonely. It can be a lonely thing many times. You wouldn't think it if you're on the other side, but it can many times be a lonely calling. We're called to be obedient to Christ, to preach His word, to confront sinful behavior in the church, to give leadership to His church, which means a lot of times not everybody will agree. And we want to know we're being faithful, as I had said in the beginning. We want to know that we're being faithful to the Lord, especially when we're always working to try to keep everything balanced. So I have the habit of making myself vulnerable to those I trust and in a safe place, and that would be my leadership team. And so it's actually on the outline for our meetings, and I ask the question, how am I doing? Is there anything that I need to hear? Is there any parking lot conversations? Those conversations where they're talking about things they don't like, or is there any grumbling going on? Is there anything I need to hear? I want to hear it. I'm opening myself, I'm making myself vulnerable to hear it. Because if you don't do that, you're going to hear it in a very negative way, in an explosive way sometimes, and things will just erupt. So I think that is really a key to then helping myself, I guess, stay balanced, I think, because I realize that it's something I need to hear. Like I talked about these inner murmur questions that we have. Am I doing a good job? Am I balancing well? And that's an opportunity to hear that. And I would say, isn't that even maybe a radical approach? I mean, that's not what we see in the world, where people are inviting, we're not seeing leaders being vulnerable, are we, in the world? No. So I think it is a radical approach, and I think it works well. And when I ask that question, I sometimes cringe. No, what am I going to hear? But most of the time, sometimes there's some things that I need to hear, and I receive those and I listen. But most of the time, what I do hear is positive feedback and affirmation. Because there's something called the vulnerable reciprocity, where it's actually when you're vulnerable with something, they usually reciprocate that, and they're vulnerable too with themselves. So what it does is it builds vulnerability-based trust within the leadership team. And then if you sort of, from the pulpit, present that as well, it creates vulnerability-based trust among everyone, because everyone kind of breathes easy, because they're like, he's going to listen if we have an issue. And so that seems to work well for me. It's been very, very good for me to function in a co-vocational pastorate position. And that can go for families as well, for our spouses. How am I doing? Making ourselves vulnerable rather than getting it from a a point of view that's, there's negativity there, or there's ill feelings and stuff. So having that time of asking our spouses, how am I doing? How am I balancing everything? Or how do you feel? And so I think that's very important. And sometimes our spouses will come at things with a different perspective. Many times it really has helped me to be aware of how I'm operating. She's helping me to see things I'm not really aware of, that I'm spending too much time here, or whatever it might be. But really, the most important thing is making ourselves vulnerable with King Jesus. I think that's the number one thing, where we're going to the Lord, and we're asking Jesus, Lord, is there anything in me that's not right with you? Is my heart not right? Am I focusing too much on, making money? That's sometimes a fear for me. Am I, there's that verse, you can't serve two masters. Sometimes we feel torn. Sometimes, am I chasing after the dollars or am I chasing after my Lord? So a lot of these struggles, and that's something that I think we can be vulnerable with Christ Jesus, and asking Him, Lord, show me, teach me. I want to hear from you. Here's a question maybe we can discuss. What is there value in this? Are you hearing me? I mean, is there value in being vulnerable, especially as pastors, co-vocational pastors? Now, the question is, what are the things that might hold us back from making ourselves vulnerable with leadership, with our spouses, with Jesus? What are some things that might keep us from doing that? What do you think? Maybe do any of you do this? Do you practice this sort of vulnerability, putting yourself out there? And I think we see that with Christ, right? I mean, he made himself ultimately vulnerable. He came to the earth, and he gave his whole life, died on the cross. Thoughts?
I think what would hinder us from making ourselves vulnerable is our self-ego, or we don't want to be correct, or just upfront with it.
Yeah.
We're trying to push all the buttons and pull all the levers the best we know how to do. Trying to balance and manage all this, but there's a part of us that doesn't like being correct.
It's definitely not easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because our pride gets in the way. I think the question many times is not if we're prideful, but where is our pride?
No, but I think it's also true that, for me anyway, I'm afraid people don't understand. How can I really relate to you what's going on in my life when you don't have a clue? You haven't been there.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's my problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an issue. Sometimes where, sometimes I'll just have to be just frank with the leadership team, especially. I'm really just struggling with this. Sort of express that. Do you guys see that? Do you feel like I need to be concerned with this, or whatever it might be? But yeah, like I said, sometimes Dale. Being a pastor can be quite lonely sometimes.
Extremely lonely.
I don't know that I was really quite prepared for that aspect of it. No one warned me. So.
But then that's an unfair expectation on the pastor. It's not the superhuman.
Yeah.
And you have to have harbors of trust.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. I thought I would share a sort of a general framework that I have as a typical week for myself as a co-vocational pastor and realizing that this isn't going to fit you. My framework isn't going to work for you probably. But I guess the message would be, I think it's important to try to have sort of a framework of, what kind of works for you. And this would be a week where I do have a sermon coming. So, before I get into that, I do want to share that a number of years ago, 6 years ago probably at least, while working on a renovation, a barn renovation, I was listening to a sermon, and I normally do that. I'm usually, when I'm working, I'm usually listening to praise and worship music, some kind of a worship music. I'm listening to sermons, podcasts. I really enjoy it actually, and so I'm building this wall, I believe it was, in a barn, and was listening to a sermon by Tim Keller, and I usually listen to his podcast. Well, this one sermon came up. It's entitled "Work and Rest." Work and rest, and it was really about the Sabbath rest. And it's really helped me to realize that there was really a rhythm to my life and what I was experiencing as a co-vocational pastor. And I would kind of dub it a rhythm of rest. So his sermon, Dr. Keller's sermon, was from Luke chapter 6, where the disciples were picking grains of wheat there on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees were there, and they told them how evil they were, and yada yada. But Jesus said, he declares, "I am, the Son of Man is the Lord even over the Sabbath." Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. And Dr. Keller, I just want to share quickly some of the takeaways I had from that message. He's saying that Jesus is saying that he is Lord, the Lord of rest. Jesus is saying he's the Lord of deep inner rest. That's what we really need. That's what we're really needing 7 days a week, is a sense of his deep inner rest within us. He says, or basically paraphrasing, we essentially, all we want to know, really, when it comes down to it, is, if our lives really matter, if we're significant. And so we can get restless sometimes when we don't quite know the answer to that. He points out that Jesus is the only one who can impart deep inner rest. So we can struggle with this as pastors who have a lot on our plates, who are juggling a lot. But then he points out that on the cross, in this sermon, Dr. Keller points out that on the cross, Jesus cried out, "It is finished." And then he poses this question, well, what is finished? What was he talking about? And then he puts the question out there, do you see him there on the cross? Do you see him restless? Do you see him on the cross restless? And then he says something like, Jesus took restlessness to the grave. And so he says then, quoting him, our problem is not the physical work, it's the absence of deep rest in Christ. And then he kind of proposes this question, how do we practice Sabbath during the week? That's how I took it anyways. How are we practicing Sabbath? How are we practicing rest in Christ Jesus? And so this really it helped me to intentionally recognize how I am intentionally practicing a restful rhythm in my life. And then in kind of trying to incorporate and recognize restful worship in my life. So I very much now I see my construction endeavors as a means to glorify the Lord Jesus as I work in people's homes, rub shoulders with them. So, and it's really helped me realizing this restful rhythm has helped me really with depression, really overcome that. So Sunday, first day of the week, wake up and usually sermons on my mind, last, adjustments and whatnot. I'm at my desk, in prayer, help, Lord Jesus, help me, and I'm ready to get this, what I like to refer to it and think about is the burden that he's given me. What's this burden I've been working with? And I want to deliver this burden, that He's given me to deliver, and I want to do it well, and I want to communicate well for the Lord, and so yeah, that happens, and Sunday morning message is delivered, and I get that off my chest, so to speak, and Sunday afternoon I really try to rest, and I might take a nap and spend time with family. Occasionally might have to visit someone, but I do try to rest then. So Monday comes along, and I usually don't push myself too hard Monday morning. I'll really usually take some time at my desk in prayer, and don't push myself. But I am usually thinking about a project. I'm going to probably, do some kind of construction, something physical, and I'm actually looking forward to that because I've been working on my sermon, and I get to do something different. It's a restful rhythm. So. Well, sometimes I might go, depending, hunting or fishing or whatever with my family. Take the whole day off. We might do that as well if needed. But I find myself looking forward to this. And I would say my sweet spot really is, I see myself doing like a bathroom remodel, and I'm getting to listen to worshipful music, and I'm maybe getting to listen to sermons. I'm just doing things with my hands, but I'm in that prayerful mindset. I mean, I really enjoy that. That's like, I'm living large if I can be doing that. But that's just me. That's just me. And what is it for you? And ask yourself, what is that place where you really feel alive? What's refreshing for you? And is it possible that can be incorporated in your co-vocational aspect of how you're living your life? So yeah, and then Monday, Tuesday is much the same. But I'm actually also thinking about, also started to prayerfully consider the message for Sunday in this time. I'm praying about it. I'm asking the Lord, what that might be. I might already know what I'm going to be preaching about, but it's in the back of my mind, and I'm prayerfully considering that, even Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday might be a blended day where I might have a visit. I might visit someone, or might have something I'm needing to prepare, like a chapel lesson or something. So that's kind of a day of, might be doing some pastoral work, and I might actually be doing some construction. Many times I will start the day, I feel more fresh in the morning, so I'll work on pastoral stuff, and then put that aside and go do something physical, construction in the afternoon. Thursdays, we have a school. Our church owns and operates a school, and so I'm there on Thursday mornings, and I'm involved with chapel, and then I usually speak to a middle school class, meet with administration, sort of touch base with them, and so I'm there Thursday mornings for that. And then Thursday afternoons, I might be trying to work on my sermon. But I do have a goal, a framework, where by Thursday I'm hoping to have, hopefully to have an outline of sort of what I'm doing, where I'm going. Maybe haven't started writing a lot of that yet. But then Friday comes, and that's usually a time where I am, really trying to focus on getting my sermon written, and usually that happens Friday morning. And then I find I just need to not think about my sermon, and I might take a few hours, depending, and go do some construction work or something in the yard or something. And that's that restful rhythm again, where there's that change, and I'm able to sort of disengage and enjoy the physical as well. So Saturday, hopefully Friday, most of the sermon is written actually. Friday, maybe morning, maybe evening. But unfortunately, I don't know if you're like me, I find myself on Saturdays, I'm usually back at it. I'm working at my sermon sometimes. But also really the hope then is to have family time and to do things that are fun and engaging with family. But yeah, does this track with you? Do you guys, do you have sort of a framework? Would anybody like to quickly share? I don't know, what time does this end? Actually, I think does anybody know? I don't even know what time we're supposed to end here.
Depends when we're done.
But it might be helpful. I would like to hear from some of you. Do you kind of have a framework? Does this ring some bells for you? Like what could you maybe share with us that maybe might be helpful for us to hear? I'd like to learn.
When do you meet with people from church? Like,
so yeah, that's usually
mentoring or
Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoons. Usually is when I schedule that, and usually Wednesday I'm scheduling that. So that's one of the things I try to do on Monday and Tuesday. I really try to guard those days. That doesn't always happen, but Wednesday I'm usually having a game plan for Thursday, Friday of how that might be structured. Like even now, I'm scheduling some stuff for Thursday afternoon.
What about your evenings?
Evenings. Well, another facet of that is that my wife homeschools our children, and so I feel like I'm in and out of the house all the time, and I'm with my kids quite a bit. We're together as a family unit. I feel like I'm coming and going all the time. Our church is only 5 minutes down the road. And I actually usually don't take on projects that are more than 15 minutes away from my house, actually. I don't travel 30 minutes, and that just helps me to guard my time. It's another boundary I've sort of set up for myself. But dinner time is a precious moment for my family. That is a time where we're always together. We're having fun together. We're listening to stories about what's happened during the day. So that's definitely something that we guard as a family. And then those evenings where we do things together. Yeah.
So do you?
Yeah.
Well, I just had a quick question. Like, so what's the balance? So I'm a little bit different than the rest of you guys. I do service at a retirement village, so it's not at a church, so it's a little bit different. But what's your time split between the construction, the home, and the ministry? Like, what are you? And it's not a judgmental thing, but what's your time commitment? Because time is our enemy, and we only have so much time.
Yeah.
And so just curious about that.
I'm 3/4 time for the church, whatever that means. But sometimes, it's I'm always, when it comes, for family, like I said, I'm very aware of what's going on in my children's lives, because they're at the home learning. And so I'm, there's those engagements with them, those little engagements, and trying to be present and aware of what's going on in their lives. It gets messy, honestly. It's hard to sort of formalize everything. It's, many times, if I've also learned what doesn't work for me. Like I just learned that, I just built a garage down the road from Dale and Shirley here, and I realized that new construction is not going to work for me anymore. It brought a whole array of problems and things I had to deal with, and I actually need the physical thing of working with my hands, not managing people and projects and stuff. But I don't know, really, I don't know quite how to answer that. I don't know what maybe would you be looking for more of?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're, and I'm not trying to put you in a corner, so you answer it how you want, but 3/4 times if you went on a 40-hour week is 30 hours, and so if you're working 60 hours a week, okay, that's a lot of time. I know even when I was. Because I'm full time, 24 hours a day, on call all the time, and you just get burnt out.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot keep up 60 hours a week. Yeah. And so, like, how does that all fit in there?
I try to be very aware of myself. There might be sometimes where I realize I need to take Monday and Tuesday or whatever, and just disengage, I might, like I said, I really enjoy working around my house and stuff, and just, really having to guard myself. And I'll do that if I feel that's necessary, But I think really for me, it's being aware of myself and what I'm needing, what my family is needing, and I realize I put more time in ministry probably than the 30 hours, but I'm really good with that. Like, I'd like to know that I'm definitely carrying my weight and then some. I'm really quite good with that. It's been expressed to me that, well, we expect those in the congregation to put in hours, and so I do that, and then I equal what they put in too. So I guess I don't know. That's one way to look at it. I don't know if I quite agree with that, but that was given to me as something to consider. I know there's been other pastors who, look at it as a formula approach where they have their day scheduled in 4-hour blocks of time. If they go to a meeting for 1 hour, that's a 4-hour block of time. I've never been good at trying to do that and manage all that. So, anybody else have some input to that? How do you work the time? That might be one of the most difficult things to do.
Well, there's a variety of people, quarter time, half time, 3/4 time, whatever, if you're bi or co-vocational, whatever. I think that most of us, when you get later in life, will feel that you've been struggling with burnout for long periods of time. And we could look at that and say that's not the way that it should be. And maybe it shouldn't. But when you look at Jesus and you follow his life along, quite often you'll see where it says he went off alone to pray. Mm-hmm. I'm convinced that he was so tired he couldn't hardly stand up because he was human.
Yeah.
He's also God, but he was also human. He was stuck in a human body, if you want to call it that way. And so we look at being burned out as something bad, but I'm convinced Jesus was burned out, if you want to use that term. Mm-hmm. He wasn't burned out because he never quit and whatever. Quite often we use the term burned out as an excuse. I think we use it too callously sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nevin, a question for you. Do you preach every Sunday, and how also do you work elders meetings or leadership team meetings? How does that fit? Like, do you have a rhythm with that?
Mm-hmm. I preach, right now I'm preaching 3 Sundays a month. Keith Miller, who we saw last night, he's been graciously for a year and a half been preaching the 4th Sunday, just wanting to use his gifts, and so that's been a real blessing. We really actually don't have anyone within the church who would be able to preach or have those giftings. So yeah, that's been just another way the Lord has supplied for the needs, our needs, my needs. And then we also have our leadership meetings on the 2nd Thursday of every month. I'm part of the leadership meetings, and then there's administrative meetings. I mentioned our school that we own and operate, and so there's that first Monday of the month. I'm part of that. I'm on the board for the school. So. But yeah, I know those things are coming, and I don't know. I've been in ministry ever since my kids' whole life, so they're used to me, coming and going, and but there was that, like I mentioned, that episode where I was half-time, like I was being stretched in ways that were very unhealthy, and it wasn't my doing, that was being put upon me by other individuals, and so that made that even more difficult. Yeah.
Nevin, do you have some built-in rhythm to care for your marriage? And you've mentioned family. Mm-hmm. A broader rhythm to say, I don't want to let my pastoring work and my bivocational carpentry work get in the way of nurturing my marriage?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
you work at
Well,
that?
and there's another variable for Christina and I. She's the secretary, administrative assistant really is her title. So we work together, which is really, actually, we were just talking about this the other night as I was kind of putting some of this together, but, you know, she really helps me a whole lot. You know, we really kind of work together because she's approached about stuff going on in people's lives, you know, marriage issues with kids and stuff. And so we're tracking together in ministry, but guarding our time, you know. So coffee on the couch in the morning, you know, having that time together where I'm usually we're reading chronologically through the Bible, and so I'm usually on the couch already with coffee, ready for her coffee too, and so we spend a few minutes there in the morning together. But then, you know, dinner time, like I said, usually after dinner's done, you know, we usually spend some time definitely engaging and laughing and whatever. But we really, do try to make sure we're having those times together. But I think the fact that we do work together, and we work together quite well. We always kind of have, even, you know, serving in Mozambique. That doesn't work with all couples, but we work pretty well together. So that's a part of our story. Yeah. Any other ideas? I'm going to leave you just with a couple here, blessings, I believe, benefits. I think being co-vocational, congregants see a part-time pastor differently than a full-time pastor. And, you know, I mentioned that I don't think I would want to be full-time pastor. Something that I saw, and I guess it conjured up a bit of fear in me, was just how, as a younger person, how people viewed full-time ministers. The way I felt like it was like, you know, the church owned them. Like, you're ours, you know, at our disposal all the time. We can call you anytime. We can, you know, you're ours. That's just kind of how I took that. And so I feel like I'm buying myself a bit of freedom being part-time. I don't know if you guys can resonate with that, but that's how I kind of look at it, and I think it's healthy. For me, I think it's healthy for the congregation, actually. I feel like I do have a lot of freedom. They afford me freedom. Another one is opportunities to share the gospel. Luke, we were talking about that. I mean, we get all kinds of opportunities to like I do remodeling. I'm in people's homes. I'm seeing their homes. I'm talking with them. You know, they're trusting me to do work in their homes. And I've had a lot of opportunity to share the gospel. I mean, I've become friends with most of my clients, actually. A lot of them do show up at church, show up at Christmas, show up at Easter. And so that's really cool. So yeah, opportunities to share the gospel. Financially, having a co-vocational ministers can be better financially viable for churches. You know, I consider myself very blessed with what I receive financially and what I'm allowed to do then, you know, with my business. I consider myself very, very blessed to be co-vocational. And then finally, I think credibility with the congregation and community. And I'm able to connect with other business owners through construction, laborers, all kinds of people, you know, that I'm able to connect with on a work level in residential construction. You know, I like the times where, you know, I might be covered with sawdust or have dirt all over me with my nail pouches on and talking to someone and it comes up that I'm a pastor. You're a pastor? You know, I think that's good, though. I think it's good, you know, for people in the community to see me. I was thinking about this, how I would like to phrase it, living under the curse just like they do. I mean, don't we have to scratch at the ground to get the food we need, the shelter. It's just that's just how it is. And so they see you doing that, just like they're having to strive and to make ends meet and live life. And so I think that is a good way to connect, because sometimes, I don't know, kind of people, I think, tend to think pastors just kind of sit in their office all day. And have you ever heard the joke, I wish I only had to work one day a week, right? So, yeah, I think that credibility with the congregation and community. Lastly, is there anybody else can come up with other blessings about being co-vocational? Did I leave something out?
Well, this is not a blessing. This is actually probably the other direction. I don't know where this fits in. So, how do you handle, let's say, drama at church and leave it there? Because I'm the type of person, I like to deal with it, get it done with, and move on. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to say, okay, I'm done dealing with this issue now, even though it's still going on, it's dragging on. And then my 16-year-old daughter decides to pick a time to push my buttons, and I realize that I'm taking out my frustrations with the issue at church somewhat on her. So how do you balance? And I'm not saying my daughter maybe, I don't even want to say she deserved it, but I mean, she pushed my buttons, and I realize that my frustrations with the church issue is coming out.
Yeah.
When I'm dealing with my daughter.
Right. So. Well, Dan, I think the word that comes to mind is just even vulnerability with our kids. Saying, I'm sorry. I said what I said, or I reacted like I did, but I hope you understand that I've got a lot I'm trying to help out with. You're wanting to help the situation, and you're not quite sure what to do, and it's frustrating. So just being vulnerable, being real, helping her to see that doing what you do, Dan, is not easy. And maybe she can appreciate that. That's what I would say. How about others? Any advice for Dan?
Are you free this evening?
That's actually a thing you can do, to say, I'm listening to you, and I am not in a good place right now to have this conversation, so we're going to have it.
And I'll just say, it's not easy to initiate that conversation. It's not, but once it's initiated, once you get the ball rolling, it can be a tremendous blessing, I think.
Nevin, could I just say something real quick? I think you all are in an amazing position, and I know that co-vocational pastoring is difficult. But I also think, in many ways, it's the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we have a lot of young people who see that and see a lot of the strengths. And I think your perseverance in that, be young men who need guidance. And so I just really admire your efforts at figuring this out. And because there's another generation that will need guidance. Because I think there's a flexibility that this kind of leadership affords the church that may well be really important in the years to come. So I just want to bless you in that.
Maybe one other thought I have here, and hopefully helpful for you, is, like I mentioned, I feel really alive and things are right with me when I'm remodeling, doing tile work or whatever, and listening to worship music, and just, that's a good place for me. What is it for you? What's that place where you feel alive? Yeah, and hopefully it's probably behind the pulpit. That's another place where you get to, you feel alive. This is what part of the reason why God created you to preach, to express this burden that He's given you for everyone else to hear, but what are other things that really make you feel refreshed, alive? Those are the things that you need to do to make sure your tank is full. And those are the things that you need to do in order to be in a healthy place. And you need to figure out what those things are. For some of you, you know right now, having a fishing pole in my hand or whatever that might be, or driving the tractor, or whatever it might be. Why do you do what you want to do? What is that love? Where is that joy for you? And do that. Take the time to do that. That's what I would say. So.
Yeah, I'll make a comment here, and this might not be indirect with what you said about blessing, but I grew up a pastor's kid, and my father was a dairy farmer, 8 kids, and he did it well.
Mm-hmm.
He did it very well. I've heard a lot of pastors' kids will leave the church over 2 reasons. Dad was always at the church. Bad taste in their mouth. The other thing is the way church people would treat their father. And one thing we can control. The other one, probably not so much. And with the other one that we can't control so much, we can't control how much. Although we need to be vulnerable with our kids, I think we also need to protect them from some of the things that maybe the church will throw at their pastor.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I just throw that out. Come to my mind. Throw that out for whatever it may be worth.
Yeah, I've heard that many times. Yeah.
And to all of us, our family, I believe, is number one in our top ministry.
Yep, absolutely.
I have 3 children, 2 daughters, 17, 16, and a son, 12. But one of my middle daughter, she pushes the boundaries. She wants to be Grace. Grace wants to be Grace, and we've seen that, where the children have to adhere to some model child in the church, and we do give Grace some boundaries, but we realize she's pushing those, and that's okay. We let her be Grace, and we realize she is an individual, and she's going to make her own decisions. We encourage her to make the right ones, and this and that. But well, let me give this illustration. Hopefully it will be helpful. But when our kids were little, had this issue in our garage. My wife could never pull the van into the garage. There was always toys right in the middle. So she had to get out, move the toys. You know what I did? I said, well, okay, I painted a white line in the garage. I was like, kids, all the toys need to be on this side of the line, and that solved the problem. So sometimes, kids they're trying to test those boundaries. But if we draw some good, doable boundaries for them, some guidelines, they usually will make the right choices, and not push the boundaries and go totally, on the bad side of that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that is a good point.
I just want to mention a question. I'm curious if you co-vocational folks have some advice in balance for leadership level people. I'm on the elder team at our church. So another piece for me is I have a thinking job. So I can't be working with my hands and thinking about whatever. So I'm full-time at my IT job, and I'm also on the leadership team at church, and I have 5 kids, 2 of whom are very small. So when I get home, it's like have a kid or 2 or several. And I'm looking for advice. Like how y'all co-vocational people are doing it. My job is not very flexible. Like I'm an 8 to 5 person. So I don't know. A couple of you mentioned you have thinking jobs co-vocationally, like advice, tips, Like we heard some of the other folks say, I mean, I block out time for things. Even in my work schedule, I try to build an hour or two where I can break away from work mentally. It's not easy. The phone's going to ring. If it's the vice president, I'll answer it. If it's anybody else, I won't answer it, basically. And so I try to carve out little pieces through the week of that so I can try to reorient, refocus. The other thing is, other than my love for Jesus, the love of my life sitting right next to me, so it's her graciousness, her ability to let me fulfill God's plan in my life, in our life. And also from a pastoral perspective, being gracious to the elders and their families, to not be onerous in trying of taking their time away to deal with church issues. So we have our elder meetings every first Tuesday of the month. The only time we actually get involved in some stuff outside of that, a texting group. So it's real quick hits, mainly in the evenings, so people aren't, because they're all full-time employees at their careers. Or maybe real quick after a Sunday service, we'll get together for 5 minutes to discuss an issue. So Pastor Mike and I are very protective of their time and their families and their relationships with their, because they have younger kids. Mike and I were empty nesters, so we kind of have a benefit with that. So I don't know if that helps at all. But, yeah. Thank you.
Are you also doing some preaching then, Nathan?
No.
Oh, okay. But I would come back to really understanding for yourself, what makes you kind of come alive, what really refreshes you, being aware of that, what is that for you, and make sure you're doing some of those things too. Yeah. Anyone else have a point?
I'd real quick say, don't get caught up in guilt. I have not perfected that. And use your wife as a sounding board. As very much to where you're spending your time. Them little ones are important.
And not forgetting too, we have to be reminded of ourselves that indeed Jesus said it is finished on the cross, and he dealt with restlessness. So if we are in him and living in him, that's where we find that true inner rest, where that restless inner murmur can be stuffed and put aside, and we can, and that's, we were talking about the Holy Spirit here this morning, but maybe I'll just leave you with a thought. We're in a relationship with Jesus Christ. Jesus is a person. Just like we are in relationships, we ask one another questions. What do you think about this? Or, what do you think about what I said? Or we might ask our spouses, really, what do you think about me? Or do you love me? Or whatever. Well, we can ask Jesus the same questions, That's something that I'll do from time to time, and then just wait for him to respond and see if, sometimes we question, was that Jesus? Well, does it line up with the Scripture? I found many times, you can ask Jesus questions like, Jesus, what do you appreciate about me as a pastor or whatever, and a lot of times, it'll be maybe an image or a verse that will come to mind, or maybe something, someone said about you. But he wants to bless us, I think. And so do that. Maybe try that sometimes when you're in prayer with him. You might be quite surprised and blessed by what you hear or see. 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 Or see.